Hey everyone, welcome back to another exciting episode of Breaking the Ceiling, where we interview entrepreneurs and get to know the reasons why they're successful and what drives them. And today is a very special episode for me because I'm interviewing a very close friend of mine who I've known for a very long time. He's a serial entrepreneur just like me. He wears multiple hats, and whatever he touches turns into gold, unlike me. I have multiple failures. I may have successes, I have failures, but this guy is pure gold. It's none other than the founder of the wine company, Kimono, Bento Cafe, Antares, and Yo China, and many more brands that I'm not even aware of. Please welcome Ashish Kapur. Hey Ashish, welcome to Breaking the Ceiling.
Ashwin, thank you for having me on the show.
Absolute pleasure. I've been waiting to interview for a long time. I know our schedules in line up, but I'm so happy that you're here. So, Ashish, let me jump right into it. I want everyone to know a little bit about you before your first food venture, Yo China. Tell me about Ashish's life before that.
So, Ashwin, I don't know if you know, but I'm an engineer by degree, electronics and telecom at McGill in Canada. After that, I worked with GE Capital in finance and Six Sigma. Worked for a little bit with GE in private equity. So, essentially, the only job I ever had was with GE. So, the restaurant business and being an entrepreneur has genuinely been baptism by fire. So that happened way back in 2003. But before I turned an entrepreneur, I was with GE Capital and overseas, worked in the US, Canada, a little with them in India, and then decided to move full time into being an entrepreneur.
Lovely. And your first entrepreneurial step was in food.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So I think for the last 18 years, all I've done is food, food, food.
Lovely. So, what was the moment? What was the aha moment? What was the moment you decided, hey, I'm going to leave this corporate job? And of course, G is one of the best companies in the world. And I'm going to leave this and I'm going to get into food. What were you thinking? What made you
No,
change
I,
your mind?
I joke with people when I say that the food at home was terrible, hence I needed restaurants to survive. But the reality is that back in 2003, I was in Canada, in Montreal, and India, it was such an opportunity, compelling opportunity to create large scalable businesses. And if you looked at food, for example, Chinese, Indian, North Indian, and South Indian were the top three cuisines, but there were no chains. And there was an obvious opportunity to try and create a national chain in one of these areas, and I think that's really the calling I had. I'd also read Paulo Coelho's Alchemist and just finished reading about how the universe conspires. So I said, let me try my hand at this whole universal conspiracy theory. And I gave it a shot, and guess what? It was a struggle, a huge struggle, but it did work out.
That is just phenomenal. I want to know a little more about the names, like Yo China, Whisky Samba. Like, what is the inspiration for those? How did those come about?
I'll first tell you about Whisky Samba and then jump into Yo China. Whisky Samba, the idea was everyone drinks whiskey, people's parents, grandparents. Whiskey is also a little fuddy duddy with that respect. It doesn't have the sexiness that wine does, or the youth quotient that wine does. So, the idea was, how do we make whiskey young and sexy? How do we make 18 the new 12? How do we get people to try a whiskey library with 300 whiskeys? So, how do we make whiskey a journey, adventure, exciting? And that's where the name Samba came in. We said, I work with a brilliant guy called Freddie Birdie, and Freddie and I, keep working on restaurant concepts. And one of the names that Freddie suggested was Whisky Samba, because we wanted to bring in this entire concept of youth, energy, adventure, the unknown, and hence the name Whisky Samba. With Yo China, it was a very different thing. We said Chinese food we are very familiar with, but how do we shout out energy? Because 65% of India is under 30, which is what the brand was catering to. It was a fast food Chinese place. So bright yellow and red, trade logos. And we said, let it shout out like yo, so let it shout out, and let's have an Americanized sense of Chinese, so that it's cool. And it's like a Pizza Hut alternative to Chinese food. So that's why the name Yo China. So it's fun to come up with the names and the logic behind each of.
Lovely. So while all your brands are, running well and running successfully now, I'm very sure in your early days you would have seen a lot of struggles. So what kind of struggles did you face when you just started out?
Well, funnily, the struggles will continue. You just become a little more adept at handling the struggles. But I think, I've gone through, I mean, if I show you snapshots, so for an early entrepreneur, the first issue is raising capital. You know, you raise angel capital, then you find the right space. You have to have a proof of concept that, forget works, that hits the ball out of the park. Then you have to scale that to size. You have to raise professional money, or private equity or venture capital. And then, like in my case, you have to go through the experience of going bankrupt nearly once. So, and then rebuilding, which is the real test. And so, and then rebuilding, making things stable, and then using some of those learnings and saying I might make new mistakes, but here I'm not going to make those again. So I've been through the gamut of that journey. Um, and yeah, it's been quite a ride.
That is, uh, most entrepreneurs struggle at that part, right? When they see their first signs of failures, when they see their first signs of, resistance on their path, most of them land up giving up when they don't realize that the resistance is meant to be there. Otherwise, every single person would be doing what they're doing and would have been successful at it, right? Very few people are able to navigate those obstacles to go ahead. It could be raising money, it's finding the right people, finding the right space, making sure your strategy is right, pivoting when you have to, when you need to pivot. Most people, they refuse to pivot, right? And I know you, and I know how many pivots you've done. I know how many new things you've started, right? And because you realize there are opportunities, and just because you started something doesn't mean it has to go exactly as per plan, right? Sometimes this life just throws you a curveball, right? Tell me some of the proud moments you've had as an entrepreneur.
I think I think seeing a restaurant give joy to diners, you
Mm,
know, I think that is seeing a completely full restaurant, and people just every table smiling, laughing, you being able to add something to I call restaurants a 60-minute holiday, and that's what really it is. So if you can add that holiday to everyone's table, I think that is the proudest moment. Then, of course, seeing people or staff that you've been with, you've built the brand with, seeing them over the years grow, and even grow in simple steps from their language skills, being more proficient in English, or
mm,
moving from a bike to a car. I think that's what really is a lot of happiness, and then doing things that India hasn't seen before. So bringing best of international thoughts, concepts to the country, and saying, why should we just copy the West, or why should we be 5 years behind
mm,
any other country? Why can't we be at the forefront of being avant-garde in terms of concepts and thoughts,
mm,
and seeing them really be accepted? Because one of the hardest things for an entrepreneur is there's a big difference between marketing and entrepreneurship, because when you are marketing, you can test and take consumer feedback. But when you're an entrepreneur, the your consumer or your guest hasn't seen what you're about to build. So what feedback will you take?
correct.
If nobody in India has seen malls and they've never seen hence a food court, what's the point of asking them whether it'll work on the third floor or second floor or first floor? It's just not going to work. you know
True.
so I think there's a lot of self conviction. There's a lot of faith. There's also a method to the madness and some science to the art. But that said, the to your question, there's a lot of happiness comes in being able to build a thought out,
Mm,
a vision out into
mm.
reality, and seeing it operate with pride and profit.
I think that is most entrepreneurs dream of that, right? Because all of them have this vision of the world that doesn't exist. And what I personally believe is if you have the grit, right, and the right guts to pursue that path, pursue that vision, you will get there. Many people drop off, but if you really pursue, work through, turn your, as I read a quote one day, turn your failures from gravestones to stepping stones. So I love that quote, right? I don't look at failures as gravestones, but look at them as stepping stones. So, but tell me about the wine company. That has been, a fantastic brand, and you're doing pretty cool things. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I love the brand. I think it's one of the most romantic brands we have under the umbrella. But with each restaurant, we're trying to solve a different problem. With whiskey, the problem was that everyone knows whiskey. The wine, the problem is no one knows wine. And especially intimidating wine lists. I mean, we can't even read French names off labels, and also giving someone a wine list in India is intimidating. So what we did was we said, you know what, let's call it the wine company, and you enter the restaurant through a wine shop, not a cellar, but a shop. So essentially, we just broke down the intimidation factor, and we had bottles, no wine list. You want to choose a bottle, you go choose a bottle from the rack, and it's by countries, by grapes. You can go play with the bottle, you can insta the bottle, you can photograph it. If it's super expensive, you can still play with it and put it back, or you can have it on your table. But essentially, there's no barrier between you and the wine. There's no wine list. There's no irritating sommelier. Yes, there are all these people available, and especially learned sommeliers once you need help. But if you just want to browse around, go play with it. And wine has such an ability because it's suitable for all functions. You have champagne and proseccos or sparkling wines for some occasions. You have wine for hustlers. You have wine for the heartbroken. You have wine for every occasion. So our story at the wine company was, listen, let's find you a wine that's right for the occasion. And if you don't know anything about wine, just enjoy it. This is not about the palate, the mouthfeel, the tannins, or the bouquet aroma, all these things. Just enjoy it. And we'll tell you a story or two, depending on the mood that you're in. Hopefully, the wine is within your the same wavelength in terms of the karma that you're hitting right now. And that's it. So it was a fun journey, and guests loved it. And over time, it started selling more wine than all hotels in Haryana put together. So there is a market. It's just about how to crack it.
Absolutely. So I'm very curious, which is the wine for hustlers? I mean, I'm not, I would put myself maybe in that category at some point, but I didn't know there was a wine for our
Yeah,
time.
there's a wine for you. There is a
There's a
wine.
wine for you. I'm just going
So,
to keep looking till I find it.
yeah, no,
I'm
there's
going to go and play with a few
There's
wines and see
actually
which
a really
one.
famous wine. It's an Italian wine called Chianti, and it's Chianti Classico. And if you see on the bottle, there's a black rooster, very prominent on the bottleneck. It's on every bottle of Chianti Classico, and the story is very clear that they back in the day in Italy, these two provinces were fighting against each other, and they said, just like the Italians, why fight when it's not in our DNA? So let's resolve this the Italian way. And they said, at the croak of the rooster in the morning, our horses will race, and whichever covers greater ground is the winner, and those winelands or those lands that we are fighting over will belong to the person who covers greater ground. Well, the hustler, which was this Tuscany region, made sure that they didn't feed their black rooster for a couple of days, so hence it croaked 5 minutes earlier. So they had a head start with their horsemen. So hence the wine for hustlers is the Chianti Classico, and
Oh, that's fantastic. See, now that story, I would love to hear that story when I'm having a glass of this. It gives you so much more, right? I mean, obviously you're enjoying a fine glass of wine, but you also, there's so much more to that experience. And you've always been a man of experience, right? I mean, since I've known you, you always want to, make sure your guests are served properly and they're given the right experience. Even through COVID, remember our discussions last year, like how can even in those COVID, how can we still have the people touch the bottle? You introduce new products so people could touch the bottle safely, right? So I love that entrepreneurial nature, the serial entrepreneurial nature in you, right? Making sure that the guest has the best experience, because that is what today I think is the most lacking thing in many places. People care so much about the product that they forget that overall experience matters more. If you just want to eat food, you can order it in. People go to a restaurant because they want to have that experience. And I think that is something that anytime I visited any of your places, that is something that has always stood out. Let it be the hostess, let it be the environment, let it be the music, let it be, anything, every element of it. And I think you've mastered. And according to me, that's been a real secret of your success. Like that eye that you have. So I think, kudos to that. So tell me a little bit more about any upcoming project, anything new that you would like to share. I know at any given point, I know you're always trying new things. Anything you can share that you're planning in the coming days, months?
yeah, I am, both on the restaurant and non-restaurant. I would say COVID gave us all the time to reflect and see what else we want to do. But in the restaurant field, I I'm looking at one or two concepts in Goa. And I find the Goan market really, really interesting because it's truly global. It's got people coming in from all parts of India and the world. So you have to have a very, very strong concept in terms of the palette as well as service, because it's very demanding. People are there from across the globe. They've spent a lot of money. They've reached there. For them, it's relief. For them, it's exciting. So standards of restaurants, in Goa need to be very high. Also, the natural beauty enables a setting that makes it the outdoors possible. And post COVID, I think a big shift in the restaurant business has been that more and more diners wish to have food in open spaces. So Goa again lends itself to that. So I will be opening two completely different concepts in Goa. Uh,
Awesome. And that's in
that's
the coming months, next
Yes,
couple of
that's
months.
in the coming months. I'm
Fantastic.
also, planning to take the whole concept of experience and service, which you're talking about, to holiday homes and villas. I think there's a huge opportunity over there. Well, it's just not good enough to give basic housekeeping and food. I think people need to be pampered from the time they reach the airport. And I think, all the learnings about restaurants, if they extrapolate it, it's nothing but experience. And how do you just add those touch points in a person's visit when he's on a holiday? So how do you take the hassle out of hosting? How
Nice.
do you
I love that line. Has a lot of it.
yeah,
Fantastic.
how do you enable a home or a villa to be a seven-star experience,
Yeah.
like a like a great hotel rather than just a villa. So
And
I think
with so many home villas coming up, the Lohonos and all these guys coming up, they're fantastic properties, but you're still stuck with whatever food that person is making at the back end, who's obviously not a chef,
yeah,
most likely a helper. Or you're always just ordering in what you're trying to go out. But if you're able to get a 5-star experience at or 7-star experience at the property, I think that's just going to blow up anyone's holiday, right? I mean, that's going to
exactly,
be fantastic.
exactly. So that's on, and then I'm very passionate about water as a whole. So trying to see well, India has such a severe water problem, and trying to see how we can get a lot of the just a small thing like ponds, not even rivers and lakes, which are ambitious, but how do we make sure that the communities which have ponds around them have clean water, and are not staying next to sewage ponds and all, so just for example, like the city of Gurgaon has 220 ponds,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
as big a number as that. So how do we make sure those ponds are clean? How do they get adopted? How do they make sure they have clean water, running water around them? So all of that, plus the whole CPD venture, which is protecting people,
Correct.
making sure they have gold class safety around them.
Fantastic. I'm waiting to find out more about the water piece. So water has been in my DNA since birth. Right?
Yes.
We're in the water treatment space. Then obviously in Equinox, the
Yeah.
water piece in the terms of testing was still continues, but my ties with water are still pretty deep, right? So I would love to hear a little bit more about this water venture. Can you explain more now, or is it right now under
No,
wraps?
no, no, sure. Essentially, um, want to take away the hassle from government, from spending, because even though there's an intent, there's no money to clean up ponds, and each of these ponds are anywhere from 1 to 3 acres with you know 10 to 30,000 households living around them in various cities in every part of India. And we just want to make sure, and a lot of them have sewage just going into the pond, and the pond, and we've seen this across. The pond is dirty, infested, it's got plastic, it's got all sorts of sewage as part of it. And I don't think it's fair to have kids in that locality, or to have people living next to poisonous gases, living next to unpleasant smells and just unclean water. So instead of it, and if it's clean water, at the end of the day we have to give back to the earth that we're taking from. So how do we recharge the aquifer with cleaner water? How do we make sure those households are living in clean surroundings, have access to clean water? Their cricket pitches can be fed with recycled water. So much can be done with just cleaning up that pond and letting them live around sustainable water rather than dirty water. So the whole idea is to use minimal electricity, use clean technology, use plants, stones, and ways to just clean up the water through through different technologies around the world. I'm working closely with Israeli technologies to do this, but essentially the idea being 200 ponds, let's clean them up and let's give people around them a sustainable way of living around clean water.
Fantastic. I think that is just absolutely superb. So whenever you're launching this, let me know, let Equinox know. You can always count on my support. You can always count on Equinox's support, right?
Thank
And whatever you've done in the past, I love the energy and I love the foresight that you bring in, right,
Yeah.
to a situation where you do not see adversity. But in that adversity, there are opportunities. In that adversity, there's so much good that can
Yeah.
be done. I think CPD was a great example of how you can offer a continuous 12-hour protection just with a single spray. Because if somebody misses spraying it 10 times or 12 times a day, people can get affected, so on and so
Yes.
forth, right?
Yes.
So that was really fantastic. So now coming back to a little bit more of your personal side, tell me about a superpower that you have that most people are not aware of.
Well, that's a great question. I think the answer for me is that you don't know that you're going to say yes. So, I truly believe that, you know, I have the ability or grace to have someone agree to, because the demands are reasonable. It's not going to be a unreasonable demand, but yeah, chances are that if I'm asking for something, it's just divine grace that chances are you might not know it, but you are going to say yes.
I think that's worked on me a couple of times.
I have to just make sure it's exercised with caution so that it's not.
It's a juice for good, but and not evil. Eh?
Yeah, yeah,
That is actually a very good superpower. Right? And I have been at the receiving end of it, and I mean, it wasn't. It was actually something. It was a reasonable ask, and it was a reasonable thing, and it was for the greater good, right? So no harm, no foul. And but as an entrepreneur, I think that's literally a very, very strong suit that will help you. And as serial entrepreneur, I'm very sure that comes in handy in
yeah.
multiple
Well,
different
it's
ways.
happened because I've lived with enough no's, so I have heard endless no's, and it was I think over time it just manifests. It doesn't happen initially.
And touche to that. Uh, Tell me about your work-life balance.
I think I'm decently good at the work life balance because um, Goa just lends itself to helping balance life a little bit because no one works in Goa. You can push them as hard as you want, but the teams in Goa ain't gonna work that hard. But that said, I think between reading, I do some sort of physical activity daily, so yoga, gym, golf if I'm in Delhi. So I think, and then I think the ability, but especially when you read a lot, right? You get so used to just trying to learn new things and getting into new things. So I think it keeps you engaged from a work-life balance. And with the kids, I'm pretty busy. I love being able to irritate them in terms of teaching them and being with them or playing with them, taking them out. In Goa, I've taken them cliff diving, cliff jumping, and waterfall jumping. And that was my 10-year-old, planning on fishing trips and stuff. So yeah, so I think it's blessed where I have my business, and that also is not an accident. Sometime very early in life, an entrepreneur had told me that do business in places you like traveling to. Don't try and grow your business. Opportunities are everywhere, but if you do want to have fun while you're working, try and grow business in places you enjoy traveling to.
That is, I think, one of the best things I've heard today. And I was actually thinking back to where have I done business outside Mumbai, and everywhere I've done business outside Mumbai has been places that I fell in love with. Then I set up something there. So it started at Bangalore, then Gurgaon, and then Phoenix, Arizona, and so on and so forth. Right? We have multiple businesses. But that is so true, right? Because if you enjoy that process, if you're going to have business in multiple places, you have to travel. And if you
Yeah.
don't enjoy going to that place, there's a good chance you're not going to go there as much and work will suffer. So I think literally the learning of my day. I have this thing that I've started. It's called the Leadership Club. It's like a group of 30 people in each WhatsApp group, and we each share our learning of the day. So this
Yeah.
is literally going to be my learning of today, which is, hey, do business in places that you love because you know you will keep growing. Uh, that being said, tell me a little bit more about your kids. How are they like? I mean, is work a big part of their life? How does
No,
that
I
work?
think, I'll tell you, I think they are 16 and 10. I have two boys. And I think it's very important to involve and be involved in each other's life as a unit in some senses. So, for example, in my water passion, I have my elder son who's equally passionate about water. In fact, it all started with him encouraging us at home and him trying to save water in the building and stuff. So I think there's a shared passion with him over there. The younger one's 10, but he's super passionate about all this cliff jumping and going learning golf and other things. So he's a little bit of a wacko, like the dad that way. But I spend a lot of time because of these shared passions. It's great because we can do that, and then the restaurant business also allows me to get them over. As I've had all their functions in my restaurant from the Yo China days to now, because I'm proud of where I am, and each restaurant for me has been a journey, as it has been for them. So yeah, we've thoroughly enjoyed that.
That is fantastic, and that's very inspirational. So for me, I have a 9-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, and my son is a national level chess player, and my daughter is a national level troublemaker.
Wow.
Right, and I tried learning chess so that
Yeah.
I could actually play with him.
Yeah.
And till date, I've not been able to, beat him. When he was 4.5 or turning 5, he started chess, and he was going to
Wow.
this class. And I saw him. I mean, I again dropped him off, but I never played chess for the like 3 4 months that he went there. I didn't actually end up playing chess. So one Sunday, I said, "Hey, you know what? Let's play some chess." And I obviously knew some basics of chess. I'm like, "Oh, he's a little kid. I mean, he's 5 years old, right?" And we started playing chess, and I'm not even kidding. He beat me in 8 moves. 8 moves. And I was like, one sec, what? Like, did you
What
do
was
anything illegal?
happened?
Then he's like, no, no, no. That's some name of the move, like Queen's Gambit or something. And I was like, real scholars make. I thought he's making it up. I actually looked it up, and it was like a rookie mistake people make. He's like, nobody taught you about that. I mean, like, what? Like, this is like the most rookie thing you've done. I was like, holy crap.
That's
And like,
lovely.
since that day, I've not been able to beat him in chess. But imagine the ego hit when a 5-year-old beats a 35-year-old
I can
in a
imagine.
game,
I can
which is
imagine.
absolutely. But he's so passionate about it, right? And what I've seen is when kids are passionate about something, they will go above and beyond, and they lose all sense of time and everything else. But if we encourage that, they can actually do something, world class.
I think it's beautiful. Absolutely. I think it's lovely how you fanned that passion and, got him to excel.
And no, the fanning the passion, by the way, comes at a tremendous cost. Every Sunday till the pandemic started, it was my every Sunday was at a chess tournament. Every Sunday. Because to take him to all the chess tournaments. Like every Sunday we used to go for a chess tournament. So he's playing inside, I'm sitting outside reading a book or on the phone, there's nothing else to do. Like he wouldn't even come back in between the games, right? So but nonetheless, right, all that pays off because nationals twice. So I think that effort kind of paid off. So now let me jump back into a little bit of what parents do for their kids, which is mentoring, right? Uh, have you been mentored by anyone? Do you have mentors in your life? Are you mentoring anyone? I would love to know.
I strongly believe in the whole concept of mentorship, but I also don't believe in any one mentor. I think each of our lives has, very significant attributes. So, for example, I would say I have a spiritual mentor in someone. I have a financial acumen mentor in another one. I have a creative mentor in a third, and some of these could be friends, but I think I've divided my life into these three, four buckets, and in each of these buckets, I have a mentor who's relevant for that very bucket. And yeah, I completely believe that it's a faster way to grow.
Absolutely. Why make the same mistake twice? Like, why repeat the same mistake somebody else has made, right? Learn from them rather than repeating it yourself. And what I've learned is if you ask people for help, you'll be very surprised how many times you actually get a yes versus a no, right? It's just that many people just don't even ask for help. Just asking for help, like, hey, can you help me with this? Like that sentence, can you help me with this? has opened so many doors for me. I have like 8 mentors in my life, all because I literally asked this question, hey, can you help me with this? And they said, yes, we got onto a call and they mentored me on this and they continue to mentor me after that, right? Uh, Tell me a little bit about your 5 year goal. Like 5 years from now, what do you see yourself doing? What do you see yourself doing personally? Where do you see your brands? I would love to hear.
Well, I love what I'm doing currently, and I hope in 5 years, it's not just a continuation of where I am, which is, making sure the 1.3 billion Indians enjoy the places that I run, enjoy dining at them, come more often. I run more of those places. So that's the restauranting piece, but I want to also take the entire service and experience learning out of it and grow that into other elements like villas, resorts, hotels, and be able to make them 60-minute holidays or even greater. So really take the experience business and grow that. Apart from that, I'm really passionate about the whole water. I'd love to see it's completely measurable. We are stressed in terms of water as a nation. How do we give back to the earth instead of drawing from the earth? How do we reuse from 3% or 4%? How do we take that number to 30, 40%? So really, how do we charge the aquifer? How do we reuse water, clean surroundings around us? So yeah, that's really the first 5 year plan.
That is absolutely phenomenal and very aspirational, right? And what I loved about it is not just only about work and restaurants, it's also about nature, it's also about giving back to earth, which is a much larger goal, but that is absolutely aspirational. So my last question to you is, a lot of new people entering the food business, the restaurant business, what is the one piece of advice that you would want them to have?
I think our business is might have a low entry barrier. So anyone can enter a restaurant given a space or capital, but I think it's really the soul. So my request or my learning would be see where in what piece of the restauranting business you're adding a soul. You're doing things a little differently, and it's done for genuine interest, not for your 40 friends or for the Saturday night that you'll have out. Because 9 out of 10 times, people see the glamour but not see the difficulties that survive in the business, and it's completely a non-glamorous business for the person who runs it or builds it. So my advice would be do it for the soul, do it because you really enjoy it. Understand that it's backbreaking, thankless in many ways, and it's not nice when you see guests publicly saying that the food in your restaurant is terrible or shaming you, or accept that, and you have to win back irate guests also. In fact, recently I put up videos because we got so fed up of sometimes dealing with rude guests. We started putting up restaurant eating etiquettes. We said, let's try and teach some of these rude guests on how to call us wait staff. But that said, I think do it for the soul, do it for the right reasons, but do it. I think it's a great business. I'll never say don't enter it. I love this business, and good luck.
That is just fantastic advice. And if people actually follow that, they already are a year or two ahead. Because what a lot of what you said is what people figure out way down after making a lot of mistakes, right? And then they keep pivoting because they don't realize why they're pivoting. The reason is their soul was never in the business, and they didn't realize that, right? So thank you so much for taking out the time and sharing openly with us and sharing all
It's
your secrets.
always engaging with you. As always, it's very engaging. Great questions. I also end up thinking of the answers after much after it's over, so which is a good sign. But yeah, good luck with all your ventures, and look forward to doing this more often.
Thanks a lot, Ashish. So, hey everyone, that was Ashish Kapur, a serial entrepreneur and a world famous restaurateur who's going to be doing a lot of more things than just running restaurants at the moment. And so, keep tuning in every week for a new entrepreneur and what makes them successful, what powers them, and what drives them. Thanks a lot, and see you in the next one.